Hi, I'm Saul. Here in Israel, when a boy becomes 13, he goes through a celebration of becoming a member of polite society and taking upon himself all the responsibilities involved. And now my nephew is going to have his celebration soon. So I've been asked to dig into the archive of my photographs from the past 13 years and find photos of him in different situations to make a nice slideshow. I don't often look at my old photographs. Doing that, I found it quite interesting. It gave me a sort of retrospective into the work I did, into my own evolution as a photographer. I took those images with around 20 different lenses that I had the pleasure to use over the years. Next to each photograph, I will label it with the lens it was shot with. So please sit back and look carefully at those images. to those who are still with me, thank you for watching. If I compare the work I do now to the work I did back then in 2013, I did a kind of documentary photography then, and I still do it now. But the images look quite different. Back then I was more occupied with critique my photographs might receive. And I tried to please my audience more than I do now, much more. I developed a sort of style of my own. A lot of monochrome. I was experimenting with different aspect ratios to the images. And you could see that in that series of photographs. It was still documentary photography, but with a strong taste of artistic, abstract elements that were combined with day-to-day experiences depicted in those photographs. I was much more selective about which photographs I was going to let others see. And I put much more attention on post-processing, on the general aesthetics of those photographs. Things that I don't do anymore. At the time I used two different systems. The classic 4/3, the DSLR system, and micro 4/3. I had lenses of both mounts at the same time, and I kept a rather nice 4/3 DSLR to shoot my 4/3 lenses. But most of my work was already transitioned to micro 4/3. The mirrorless micro 4/3 camera were more advanced, more sophisticated. They offered some features that were improved, or features that were completely absent from the older system. But let me tell you a secret. The 4/3 lenses were much nicer, and you could get a good set of lenses for much cheaper than in the micro 4/3 system. In micro 4/3 I had to go to quite some lengths to preserve the appearance of the photograph I liked. I shot rather expensive micro 4/3 primes, like the Olympus 25mm f1.2, a lovely lens, and some Falklanders with a very fast aperture that were completely absent from the native repertoire of glass. On 4/3 I got very similar results with quite common zooms, like the 11-22 or the 14 to 54 millimeters. Now, I always enjoyed shooting at extremely low light, mainly in our local pub. And that system, both systems actually, challenged me a little bit, because the autofocus in low light, or coming to think of it, even manual focus, were not very convenient. I had to acquire really fast lenses in order to shoot in those conditions. And it made my life difficult. At some point, I also transitioned from 50 millimeter equivalent to wider focal lengths. And I remember one lens I was really interested in, the Olympus 17 millimeter f1.2. But it was very expensive and I couldn't justify paying the asking price. In 2018, I finally made the move and purchased a used Nikon D750 with a Sigma 35mm f1.4 lens. I was willing to put up with a lot in order to achieve better performance in low light. The D750 was quite an agricultural camera compared to the Olympus EM1 Mark II I was using at the time. It didn't have stabilization. It was noisy. It was unsophisticated. It didn't have all those fancy features. And I had to put up with problems that I was sure I would never have to think of again, like front and back focusing of the lenses. When I started using that system, it really made my life easier in very low light conditions. Focus acquisition was made possible and quite easy. There was more dynamic range in the photographs, which really helped in that contrasty low lighting. After a while, I stopped using my Micro Four Thirds cameras almost entirely and never looked back. Well, I did for a short period in 2019 when I acquired a Pen F to complement those large, clunky cameras. But that is a different story. I like shooting people. Those Sigma, Tamron, and Tokina lenses that had fast apertures made an impression on me. So I kept buying more and more of them. But at some point I noticed that my photographs were held back by those fancy lenses. Of course, they were modern lenses. They ticked every box in comparisons, in tests, but somehow they were constipated. They didn't allow the flow of life to come through in the photographs. They were flat and dead. And there was no one to warn me, no one who had the courage to say that the emperor has no clothes. Until I finally got it. I acquired some older AFD lenses that were inexpensive, just to test whether my theory was correct. And indeed, those older lenses provided me with images that I liked, that were alive, that were deep and allowed the emotion and the character of the people who I shot to be more present in my work. Looking back, some of those photos I took with the Sigma Art lenses look like they were taken with a smartphone, not a very new smartphone. These days I'm much more discerning about the photographs I take, about the lenses I use. My style has also changed. I am not as fussy about the aesthetics. I tend to stand closer to my subjects. I find it more intimate. My documentary style changed. It deserted those aspirations of being pieces of art. And I'm more raw and direct in my photography, even if my photos are not as pretty. The lenses I use are responsible for the sense of life, the sense of reality in my photographs, more than I would like to admit. My experience taught me not to trust online reviews and test the options in the market for myself. To save myself some time and money, I developed a way to predict the character of a lens based on its MTF chart, based on its optical formula, on the chemistry of glass used in an optic. And that new way to select the right optics works for me most of the time. On the other hand, cameras do not affect the images you obtain so much. Of course, in low light, it's a different story. But when there is plenty of available light, it doesn't matter whether you use an old 4/3 DSLR or the newest mirrorless full frame camera. The photos will look very similar. The lens affects the result a lot more than the camera. So this is another lesson I have learned from this retrospective. You might have seen it yourself in that little presentation. The only real advantage of those full-frame mirrorless camera is the adaptability of the mount. They can host almost any lens ever made. I'm talking about older vintage lenses or lenses made for rangefinder systems. Due to the size of that full-frame sensor, those cameras can represent the whole field those lenses were designed to project. It makes them quite nice tools. For instance, this is a lens I received only yesterday. I've always looked for a nice portrait lens. Portrait lenses, or in general, lenses in the short telephoto range, seem to be too harsh, too sharp. Their fall off of sharpness is just too fast. The backgrounds tend to melt into oblivion, even when you stop down the aperture a little bit. This lens doesn't do that. It is very subtle. It is very pleasing to my eyes. I only had the chance to take a few photos of the animals. It's that new. But you don't need to shoot a lens a lot to see what it can do. I happen to like the results I see from it quite a lot. If you ask, it's the Light Lens Lab 75mm f2 SP2. It's a replica of an old Cooke lens. So, boys and girls, please pay attention to the optics you use. They will determine what your photographs look like. They will determine your style as photographers. Sterile modern lenses will make your photos look sterile. You will have perfect pixels but dead photographs, unfortunately. While slightly flawed lenses are more interesting. The subtleties are visible. They make life come through. Right, I think that will be all for today. If you found this video helpful in any way, please consider buying me a coffee. There's a link in the description below. It's a nice gesture between gentlemen. Thank you for watching and see you again soon.